name is Lidia Oshlyandsky. I do live in Stockholm. I do not speak Swedish. If you speak Swedish and want to speak Swedish to me, you will be disappointed. I apologize profusely. I am not good at languages. Sweden is my fourth country. I grew up in the States. I lived in London for a long time, and I did my PhD in the UK, and I was originally born in Ukraine. Yes, my family is fine, thankfully. I've lived in Sweden for 10 years. My partner is Swedish, so he is the Swedish connection. There is no other Swedish connection. I did not move to Sweden to work for Spotify, which is the other reason you find Americans in Sweden. So if you find an American in Sweden, they're either there because they fell in love with a Swede or because they work for Klarna or Spotify. I am the fell in love with the Swede kind. So that's me. I was cute. See, I was really cute. My kid is cuter. I've spent 25 years in tech. I started out as a back-end engineer. I quickly moved on to what was then called business analytics, product analytics, business analyst, business architect. That was a really great title. I have no idea what that means to this day, but that was my title for a while. I then found UX. So I went into design and user research. I fell in love with UX. I did a master's degree, and then I did that horrible, stupid thing where you do a PhD and you pay for it yourself. Do not do this. But I get to call myself a doctor when I book hotel rooms, which is very cool. Never book a flight with doctor because something might go wrong. Because I worked in consulting and in agencies, I got to work for some incredible brands, both in the UK and the US, but I've also worked in-house for the big tech giants like the Googles and the Spotifys. Many Pets is an insurtech company, and we've kind of branched out to being pet well-being, pet health. So we have insurance, we have televet, so like, you can call your vet on a video call, and we also have pet medicines. It's a booming industry because everyone got a pet during COVID. How many of you got a pet during COVID? Ah, hello. We might launch in France soon. We'll talk. It's also just a really amazing and lovely and fun company. And the insurance industry is one of those industries that hasn't been properly disrupted by technology. So I find it super interesting just as a pure geek to disrupt something that hasn't been disrupted. And then the pet industry is likewise never been disrupted. And the way that we visit our vets and that we treat our animals is the same way that that was done when I was a kid. So as a pure geek, it was just a really interesting industry for me to get into. I have a kid and a dog. I told you he is cuter than I was. I mean, I know. The kid is Jonathan. He's 9 years old, and the dog is Douglas. He's 6 years old. They are the best. In my spare time, I bake. See, I told you there'd be photos. This was a really good day. They don't always look like this. So in terms of personal life, after having a child, I swear to you, I used to have hobbies. They've all disappeared. I used to do yoga regularly. I used to run. All of that is gone, but I still bake. And so you get that photo. I also live outside of Stockholm in the countryside. We have a really large garden. There's a lot of fruit. So I spend all summer making, I guess in French it would be compote. It's not confiture. It's not enough sugar. But I have a lot of that. So if you ever come and visit, you can have fruit. So that's a little bit about me. I think we should pause on that picture. On that picture, because they're cute. You guys want to stare at that, right? Because they're cute. That's it.
Okay, so Alexandra, I'd like to start with the first question.
So thank you for being here. And of course, we're at Deezer, and we have like one specific question, the very first one for you. So you've been working at Spotify. How was it to be a tech woman at Spotify?
So I think one of the things that surprised me when I walked into Spotify was the number of women at Spotify as a tech company. That was pretty unusual. I am very, very used to being the only woman in a room. There was a lot of women at Spotify, and I thought that was really nice. I think in general, they're a company that tries to do exactly what you're doing, which is hire as diverse talent as you possibly can hire. And that's not always easy in tech. There's not that many women in tech. There's not much there's not much diversity in tech, to be honest. So yeah, it was all right. It wasn't the job for me, but it was fine. This is being recorded.
Yeah, we had more crunchy details at lunchtime.
I think for me, it was not the role for me. And the reason I went to the company was to join a woman that I thought was a fantastic female leader, Rochelle King, she's now at Netflix. She's just brilliant. Rochelle, if you ever hear this talk, I mean it. She left shortly after I joined, and then our organization got reorged. So the job that I had taken originally was just not the job I ended up in. And so it was probably like I was the wrong person for that new role, and that new role was not the role I would have necessarily taken. Does that make sense? And that's like, it's kind of like a dating experience where they're a nice person and you're a nice person, but it just somehow doesn't click.
So interestingly, you said that at Spotify there was lots of women, but with your career, you had like 20 years of career. And so how did you manage to break the ceiling glass as a woman?
I don't think there was any intentionality behind it. I think part of it is being in the right place at the right time. I went into UX before UX was a thing. Like there were very few universities that had HCI degrees or human computer interaction degrees. There was very few people working in UX. And suddenly you're this weird thing and you're doing this weird thing. Part of it was hard work. Part of it, I've realized as I've gotten further and further in my career that I became almost immune to some of the bullshit. And I'll be very honest about it. And I now ask my own team and my own diversity folks to call me out on something if I'm almost blind to something that's going on. Because I'm like, well, that's always been that way. Maybe it shouldn't be. So I honestly don't think there was anything intentional behind it. I was also really lucky to have amazing mentors, amazing managers that always pushed me, that were super honest with me, that really believed in me. And I think that part of it is finding places where you feel not just supported, but also feel challenged and feel like if you're going to be part of the bullshit, they will call you out on it.
Then what were the main challenges for you?
There's the usual stuff, and I would like love to get other people's stories. I mean, there were instances being told that you weren't a real engineer because you're a woman. There was one that I told you about where this particular manager, his team had been responsible for coding an infinite loop that had brought the entire website down for hours. And when my team asked, like, can we please look at the code and can we please figure out what's going on? I was told we need a real engineer to look at that. Your real engineer has just brought the entire website down. But all of these situations, like you've witnessed this, you've probably experienced it. There's different ways to react to that. Like right now, it just makes for a funny story. I have no idea where that guy is now. Couldn't care less. He doesn't remember me. He can't care less. It just makes for a funny story. There's also situations where I was undervaluing myself and I would have a manager that would be like, no, you're going up for that promotion. You're ready. Just do it. So for every negative story, I can tell you there were also the positive stories. I think it's more helpful to take them all, like, I'm never going to tell you just focus on the positive because I think we learned from both. But I think it's taking all of them together and saying, okay, well, what did I learn? And how can I be better than that person that just told me I'm not a real engineer? Because obviously I have boobies and someone with boobies can't be a real engineer. But how do I make sure that that doesn't happen to the next person and the next person? And as a manager, how do I make sure nobody ever says that to one of my folks?
And how do you feel? Do you feel you did something specific at some point to get accepted by those persons?
I think, again, it's a trial and error thing. I definitely remember trying different things at different parts of my life. I remember trying to be really serious. And if you haven't figured it out, I am not by nature a serious person. I am super sarcastic. It's why I loved living in London. I think that humor is literally the solution to everything. So I tried being that serious person. Then I tried to be like the more invisible person that didn't say anything because I didn't want to stand out. And there was like this trial and error. And at some point you find a place where you are comfortable being the professional that you are. I don't think that you're ever going to be the same person that you are with your best friend or you are with your parents or you are as a mom. But you're going to find that professional you that is comfortable for you. And there is a difference between the professional you and the you that's out clubbing with your friends in the evening. Like, let's be honest. But there's still the comfortable professional you, the one that is comfortable being sarcastic or funny to a certain level. Maybe you're not going to tell all the jokes that you would tell at that club, but you're still going to be comfortable. It took me a long time to get there. I don't know if I did anything, again, very specific or very intentional. It just didn't feel comfortable any other way. I think there's also something to be said for finding the place for yourself where that comfortable you is in a happy place, where the people around you are happy with the comfortable you. Does that make sense? And there's going to be lots of those places around. You just have to find them. And I also think it's important to surround yourself with people, again, that support you but challenge you. Because maybe you have overstepped a boundary. Maybe you have displayed a bias. And it's important to have the people around you that are in their comfortable place and can point at you and say, you know what, that was not cool when you did that. And that's really important as well.
Good. Well, I just put it in the Zoom discussion, but if you feel like asking questions to Lidia, we will be happy to take them during the interview. So I don't know if in the audience here in Paris we have an opening question to Lidia, or if we shall move to our next question in the interview. Anyone wants to start asking
Any
a question
questions?
to Lidia? Yes, Aina?
Okay. Since you've been working in tech 25 years, you probably worked on so many different products. Is there a product that you really, really wish you had a chance to work for, or maybe even invent?
No, not invent, because that sounds like really hard work. Work on, that's a really good question. When my son was younger, there were all these amazingly cool kids apps that teach them various things like math or language. And each of them was so unique and so well done. And I really wish at some point in my career, I had had a chance to work on like a kids app that just sounds like so much fun and so super creative. Plus, there's no way you can put yourself in the brain of a kid. They're just amazing. They're sponges. It's freaking amazing. Like if I had 3 brain cells that worked as fast as his, oh my gosh. I really wish I had done that at some point in my career. And it's not too late. Maybe I still will, but I've never worked in anything kids related ever. And again, if you have kids and you're using these apps, like there was one called Infinite Reader, and they have Infinite Math. I can highly recommend it for younger kids. It was just amazing. It was so much fun. It was so beautifully designed. It was so creative. It's like, oh, maybe it's a horrible place to work. I have no idea. I don't know who does it. I've never met the company, but it just seemed like that would be so much fun.
I have ideas. We can talk.
Okay, deal. You can invent. I
can.
Okay, good.
But yeah,
Good.
Yeah,
Okay,
let's talk.
we'll talk.
Okay, if we don't have, I'm checking if we have questions from people remotely, but we don't for the moment. I'm gonna take the next question of the interview, which is quite a common question, but that we may have all faced as women, is having space as a woman in meetings, in discussions, in the enterprise world. Was it difficult for you to be able to have that space? You've been hinting on your difference from your humor standpoint, but also maybe from your roots. Could you tell us more about this?
So I've been an immigrant my entire life. My family immigrated to America when I was 6 years old. I immigrated to the UK at the age of 30, and I've lived in Sweden for the last 10 years. I honestly feel that my outsideness is my secret sauce. Because I am different, it somehow means that I think differently and I am different. If you work in tech and you're predominantly surrounded by males, usually of a certain socioeconomic demographic, you are automatically different just by being different. Maybe you're not white. Maybe you didn't grow up middle class. Maybe you are female. Maybe you're intersexual. Maybe your gender identity is different. I think those differences can be really special. And I think those differences should help us find our voices. Because you can sit in that meeting or that creative session and say, have you thought about it from this other angle? Because I represent this community that maybe you haven't thought about. And because you haven't thought about them, we can't get them as customers, or we can't do as well for them. There's all these different ways to use that and to think about it not as a disadvantage, but as something that makes you uniquely you. And you all have it, whatever it is, for sure you have it. So I find it to be the one thing that I've always fallen back on. And when people ask me where I'm from, I'm like, I'm a citizen of the world. But it's also, it's something that I feel helps me see things from different angles. And I think that is a secret superpower. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does,
Okay.
of course.
And just I have a question around that. Is your team like super also like diverse, and do you manage to build a diverse team? Or
So my team is around 40 some people now, and I have several functions. So there's the design function, there's the product management function, and what we at many pets call delivery function. In other companies, it would be like program management. Yeah, they are pretty diverse. We can always do better. I think it's also in certain fields, it's easier to get the gender diversity balance. Like design is more gender balanced by default. I'm not saying you don't have to work at it, but if you go into a design program or a human computer interaction program at a university, it'll be almost half and half. So it just means that the pool of humanity that you're pulling from is automatically more diverse than if you go into a hardcore, I don't know, computer engineering program at a university. And if you look in the room in that undergraduate program, it'll be mostly men. So I'm not saying you don't have to work at it and you don't have to be intentional about it. But I think that in certain fields, you have a larger pool of diversity to pull from. I think in the product team, we're not as diverse as I'd like us to be. I would really love us to get a little bit more of that, but it's not just gender diversity. I think it's also that predominantly we're a UK-based team. We only have a few folks co-located with me in Stockholm. We currently don't really have any product or engineering based out of the US. So it's also not just about gender diversity, but geographic cultural diversity. So I think I'm always going to think we can do better, to be honest. And I think we do incredibly well. As a company, especially the senior leadership team, we're half and half. I've never been in a senior leadership team like that before. That's just amazing. Like I walked in the room and literally half the room was women, or I brought it up to half. It was not quite half them, but that was something really special. Our engineering team is really diverse. So it's been, echo. Again, I think it's a challenge, and I think what you're doing, like intentionally approaching it, is really important, because otherwise it's just really easy to hire the first person that can pass the coding test walking in the room. So.
And in your meetings, or I mean, have you witnessed in meetings among your teams, for instance, that sometimes women would struggle to have their voice or to just be able to give their arguments? And in that case, do you try to balance this, or how do you manage?
I think it's intentionality. If you are in that room and you witness anybody, whether that's a woman or anybody else, having a hard time saying their piece, look at them and say, hey, I see you're trying to say something. And I think it's up to all of us to do that, not just the managers, not just the women in the room. I think this is a big part of how men can be allies. If you see that the person sitting next to you is not able to take that breath and say their thing, pause, look at that person, make the eye contact and say, I see you want to make a point. Can I hear what you want to say? I have had that done for me, and I try and pay it back and pay it forward. I think it's really important for all of us to do that, because it's not just even about gender or ethnicity or race. Some people are just much more comfortable speaking out than other people. No one believes this, but I am a really strong introvert. Nobody that knows me believes this. But it can be really difficult as an introvert to just take the space to let your mind process and be like, okay, now I have something to say. I know we went off that topic 2 seconds ago, but it took me the 2 seconds to catch up with my thought. And so even for those kinds of folks, it's super important to pause in the room and say, what do you want to say? And I think we can all do that. And we can do that more.
And well, transitioning to the next question, let's say that it's often said that women need to have to adopt more manly skills, like be more assertive, dare to ask, or just own their ambition. What do you feel about this? How would you answer to women that feel that they betray themselves by behaving or shooting up like a man?
So I hate it when people tell me to be more masculine. I think that's bullshit. And I think people need to, I'm not going to swear because we're being recorded. I think people need to effing stop doing that. I don't think that having a more masculine world is helping any of us. I'm sorry, I really don't. I think people should be kinder and maybe gentler. And if those are quote unquote feminine traits, then maybe we need more feminine traits in the world. So I also like, that cute kid. I love this kid. I got fat for that kid. Really, I did. So I want him to get to the age of 18 and be able to come home and say, Mom, I decided to go study nursing, and that's perfectly okay. Mom, I decided to be a daycare teacher with like little kids, and that's perfectly okay. And somehow that's not the roles we assign to men either. So who is this serving? I have given birth to a white middle-class male. There he is. It's not serving him either. It's preventing him from possibly doing something that he would want to do, but it's classed as gender female, and so he would be discouraged. And that's bullshit. So who is it serving? It's not serving me as a woman, and it's not serving my future privileged white male. So who is it serving? It's just utter rubbish. How do you look at someone and say, I want you to be more assertive and more masculine? What does that even mean? Maybe the masculine person in the room is working really freaking hard to also be heard. What does it even mean? Yeah, we can go off for hours. I get really angry.
Okay, we got water.
Really heated. Like, what does that mean? I also feel like it's very sort of Western culture to say these are masculine traits and these are feminine traits. And if we look outside of the sort of core European markets where those traits have been defined, what does those traits translate to if you're someplace completely different? What does female mean? What does male mean? What does it mean to be more masculine or more feminine? So I have a male partner. He took more parental leave than I did because I'm a crazy American and I only took 4 months, even though I live in a country where I could have taken 2 years. Don't do that. But because he's Swedish, and in Sweden it's much more accepted, and it's actually in law that he can take time off, as much time as me, he ended up taking way more time off. Does that make him more feminine? Trust me, he's not. He's as guy as they get. But what does it mean to be a more feminine person? So because he took care of his own child for many months at home, does that make him more feminine? I don't think it does. Because I didn't take as much time off to take care of my child, does that make me less feminine? I don't think it does.
Cool.
Sorry.
No problem.
I can continue going off on that one.
We appreciate your enthusiasm in answering the questions. Well, actually, we just received three questions from people remotely. Let's start with this one. What's your view on sarcasm? Do you agree that sarcasm fits powership? They are quite tough questions.
Yeah,
let me tell you.
I don't know. So I grew up in a really sarcastic family. Sarcasm is literally ingrained in me. This kid is 9 years old. He's already sarcastic. He rolls his eyes at you. He makes all sorts of sarcastic comments. You don't survive in my family unless you have sarcasm. I also look at sarcasm not as a negative trait. I think it's used for humor. And I know that sarcasm can be used really negatively to like strike people under, but that depends on who you are and how you use it. So to me, sarcasm is just humor. And I realize it doesn't translate to all cultures. It definitely doesn't always translate in Swedish. So I do have to watch it. And I grew up in the States, and especially in the Midwestern United States, sarcasm is also not, it's not like it is in Britain. If there are British people listening to this, I love your sarcasm. So yes, it can be used for wrong and it can be used for right, but isn't that true of just about everything? So it's a great question.
Yeah. Using humor in a positive way, just maybe to just like step back a little bit and reflect also on oneself. But obviously we believe that sarcasm used in a bad manner will absolutely not helpful.
And honestly, most of my sarcasm points at myself rather than other people, because you don't know how a person's going to take that joke unless you know them really, really well. So I think humor pointed, as we've learned at the Oscars, humor pointed out is not always received the way that you think it's going to be received. So be careful with that. That was sarcasm.
Yeah, unless people like your humor and pay to come and
that's
and see your humor show, but it's not how it works in enterprise, in companies. Maybe another question before we go back to the interview. I think you can. Well, actually, we got two, so maybe I can give you the choice. Which one would you? Oh, you don't have your glasses. I forgot. Sorry.
They're in my bag.
I brought mine. Maybe I can. So yeah, let me.
So the question is, what lessons or advice from being a woman in tech leadership do you think could most apply to women in other traditional male domains, especially at management level oh, that's interesting. Pure, yeah, machismo.
Machism.
Oh, machismo, right? And mainsplaining or technical subjects. That's a great question. So, like the stereotype of when you take your car to be fixed and they start mansplaining to you about wheels and stuff. And I have no like practical engineering background, so I usually find that helpful. But I think, again, approaching it. So I have this approach, and I use this as an approach that works for me. And I'm not saying it can work for anybody else, but it works for me. I take all those situations as questions. So instead of taking it like this person's being a complete jerk to me, I kind of treat the way that they're behaving as a question. So they don't understand what I understand. So I then make eye contact and I say, actually, I understand exactly what you're saying, and you don't have to explain it further. Here's what I understand. And if that doesn't stop them, then really don't waste your breath. I think that treating that as a question of understanding and experience makes it easier to stop them in a polite and kind way without making them feel bad and them getting defensive, and also asserts your knowledge. And again, a polite way that doesn't make you feel like I have to stick up for myself. Is just like, I understand what you're saying. Here's what I've understood. Let's move on. I think that can work in any field.
Yeah, that's a very good advice. Thank you. Alex, do you want to? Oh, you want to answer?
I don't know.
I wanted to keep it for after, but what would you say to the women whose role don't penetrate the marginalized field of STEM, but still believe in women's fight for inclusion and diversity?
That's a great question. Even if you are in a field that is more female-centered or more female-dominated, they're usually, again, in the Western world, they're usually what would be called nurturing fields. So nursing, teaching. You can still do a lot by just advocating for women to be heard generally, but also advocate for men to enter that field. Because again, you're not serving anyone by excluding men from nursing or excluding men from teaching or wherever else. There was a really interesting article many years ago, I think it was in The Guardian, about a man who was a midwife. Think about the words midwife. You're a male midwife. It's like being a male ladybug. Like, you are a man in a completely female-dominated industry, and he loved his work. He loved his job. It was his calling. He loved being there for that miraculous, painful, horribly dirty, massively disturbing moment of birth. This is why I only have the one. And he loves this. And yet, here's a way that as women fighting for equal rights in a field like computer science or any STEM field, we can also be helping in other fields. He should feel as welcome to be a midwife as I feel to be a PhD in computer science. So there are various ways to spin this. And it was really interesting reading that article from him because his experiences reminded me of my experiences. Because he's the only guy in a female field and he has lots of patients that come and see him and they don't want to see him because they don't feel comfortable. And what do you say to a woman that doesn't feel comfortable at that very, again, it's a very awkward and interesting moment in your life as you're giving birth and you don't feel comfortable with him in the room? I can't say anything to that woman. I can't. But he says, I respect their choice and I respect what they need. And if they don't need me, then I'll move to the next patient and the next patient. But how can we advocate for him? How can we make people feel more comfortable in that situation? Maybe they won't, and that's their right. And I'm not sure if I would have. My midwife was female. I have no idea how I would have felt in that moment. I was already feeling really shit. So I have no clue. But it was really interesting to hear his side of that perspective and realize that my experience as being a woman in tech could be echoed by somebody who's in a female-dominated field and is not female. So I'm really curious, how can we, as women in fields that are more female, advocate for others? I also feel that female-dominated professions get underpaid, so you can advocate for that. So there's all sorts of ways.
And do you think the company has a big role to play in bringing more fairness, or is it like just individual?
No, I think as companies, as managers, as employees in a company, we build company culture, all of us. I think the more intentionally we work at bringing external voices, again, not just based on gender, but maybe gender identity, maybe culture, maybe work background. The more we open ourselves up to different and unique voices, the better it is. And I think you have to do it intentionally as managers, as a company, as individuals in the company.
And did you witness in your career, like any company doing that well?
I think lots of companies do lots of things really well. Like you guys have brought me to Paris. Thank you. It's amazing to be able to talk to a group of people I don't normally talk to about these things. I think there's lots of things that we can do. It's about opening the door somehow and listening to those voices. So this is amazing. I've never heard of a company bringing in external speakers like me for a diversity and inclusion event. And I think my company does an amazing job with diversity and inclusion right now. And we bring in more professional speakers, like people who advocate diversity. We just had a talk on neurodiversity that completely blew my mind. It was neurodiverse and autistic folks. And I have several autistic people in my life. And it blew my mind listening to these people who advocate for autism. I was like, wow, I had never known that, even though I have a godchild who's autistic. It was just amazing. So doing things like that, a lot of companies do that, but I think, again, doing that intentionally, also inviting people into your hiring process that are different, that are not the normal people you would have in your hiring process. Just letting them interview for that position. That's an amazing thing to do. Maybe you usually look at particular backgrounds or particular universities. Maybe you open up to different ones. That can be hugely, hugely impactful.
Thank you. One more question. No, lots more questions. Yes. We had lots of questions for you. What main bias did you face in your whole career?
So I have an American accent and a Ukrainian surname, and I've lived in England and I live in Sweden where I don't speak the language, and I'm a woman that works in tech. So where do you want to start?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, again, we can go around the room and everyone has a story. I face the women aren't really engineers. I face the, can you still do your job now that you're a mom? Obviously I can. Yeah, I've had really interesting situations where, again, it depends on how you take it. I remember getting on a call with someone in a job, and by that point I'm living in Sweden, and I have this really funny, impossible to pronounce Eastern European surname. And the guy gets on the call and he's like, "Oh, I thought you'd have a Russian accent." Like, I can fake one really, really well. Like, no one's business. I have the best fake Russian accent on the planet. But no, I'm American. He's like, "Oh, I had no idea because you live in Sweden and I know your family name is Russian." I said, "Well, actually it's Ukrainian, but yeah." And it turns out that his family, so I could have taken that in a really wrong way. But it turns out that he's American. His family was originally from Belarus and Ukraine, like whatever, 3 generations back, because everyone in America is from somewhere else pretty much. And he just really was excited to talk to someone that may have had his family's cultural background. And that was a really interesting moment because, again, you get on a call and after saying, "Hi, my name is so-and-so," the first thing out of this person's mouth is, "Oh, I thought you'd have a Russian accent." Again, I can fake one, were you? But that's not what he meant. It just sort of blurted out, it came out, but all he was interested in is he was really curious because he saw the family name. He was like, "Oh, this is someone from my cultural background, or at least my great-grandparents' cultural background." And he just wanted to have a conversation about that. So again, I think it depends on how you, I'm going to use the word interrogate, but how you question those people's behaviors. Is the intent ill, or is it just curiosity or ignorance or something else? I try and approach every single one of these situations as a question, as curiosity. I don't always succeed. There have been many moments in my life where I've come home literally raging, and my poor, long-suffering other half has to listen to it. But I work really hard not to get angry and instead look at it as a question. I'm not saying that will always work, and I'm not saying that's the solution. I think sometimes that might be part of the problem. Maybe we should be getting angrier at some of this bullshit, but that's the way I cope.
I have 2 questions from the audience remotely. Maybe we have some questions in the room. Yes? Oh, we have 2. Good.
Well, first one about your son, because I have one as well, but he's not 9 years old, he's 9 months old. And I was wondering if you, yeah, very cute. I was wondering if you do something specific about how you raise him in a way that removes the bias and the prejudice that we get engraved because of the society and all the ways people start thinking around you as a kid you raise, and you just do the same things unintentionally?
That's a great question. I hope so. Can you ask me in like 10 to 15 years?
He's 18 years old. Yeah.
Yeah. So I can give you a really concrete example. He goes to the international school in Stockholm, which is an amazing community, an amazing place. I can't say enough about it. You do have a lot of expat families there. And often that means that the female of the couple is not working because they've moved. I'm not saying always, but there's quite a few of those examples. And at one point, I think he was in first grade. He said, "Mommy, all the other mommies are coming to school. Why aren't you there?" And that kills you. Like that face, even cuter, he was chubbier back then, is looking at you going, the other mommies are there. Why aren't you there? And in that moment, I actually got a little angry and I just answered really bluntly, which I probably shouldn't have done, but I'm actually glad now that I did. And I just said, because mommy works. And I've never been asked that question again. Because mommy works. He's never said ever again, why aren't you coming? Instead, he now asks, are you or Papa coming, or are both of you coming? Who's going to be coming to this event or this thing or this lunch or whatever? And then he gets really excited if both of us can make it. My other half works for himself, so his schedule is much more flexible in many ways, which means that he's there a lot more than I am. And that's unusual in the community, I guess, but maybe not, I don't know. I think it's, again, about being intentional in the way that you explain what's important. In that moment, I did get angry because I feel guilt constantly that I'm not there, that like today they're off climbing and being out in the woods and I'm working and I'm here with you. So there's part of me that's like, I'm not at work. I'm here with you guys and I love it. I'm in Paris being fed really nice food. On the other hand, I feel guilty because I'm not with my kid, right? Like I gave birth to him. I owe him a good existence on the planet. On the other hand, it's about making sure that that guilt doesn't translate to you sacrificing what's right for you as an individual. And that shows more than anything I can say. Like you and dad go have fun. Have fun climbing, have fun in the woods, take the dog out. Mommy's going to Paris because she's going to work and she's going to have a fun conversation. And that's okay.
Right, definitely you need to be resilient and nice to yourself, because I think as women we need to deal with a lot of guilt. Too much guilt. It could be another long interview, but feeling guilty as a woman. But that's really nice to hear from you. Sorry.
Hi. I have a question. So you mentioned your international background, etc. And if you had to pick one striking thing from each of the cultures where in the countries you've lived about the gender balance, what would it be?
So Sweden is the first place I've lived, and probably one of the few countries I know where there is this very, again, I'm going to use the word intentional. I think I've used it 100 times now. There's an intentional governmental legal push to get equality into the workplace. So you get 480 days of parental leave, and that parental leave is assigned to the child, which means you can share it as you wish among the couple. And it doesn't matter who the couple is. There is no prejudice based on sexual orientation, marriage status. It is the child and it's the child's parents, plural, that get that 480 days. If it is a heterosexual couple or any kind of couple, it doesn't matter. Each person in the couple has to at least take 90 days or you lose it out of the pool of 480 days. And the thing is that you pay for it, right? Like we pay tax and you are paid for that parental leave. So it is in your best interest, if you're an intelligent human being and can do even rudimentary math, to take that 90 days. That is brilliant because it has destigmatized leaving work for 90 days to take care of your kid. So most men in Sweden will at least take the 90 days, and that is accepted. And so therefore you expect anybody that has a child to be gone for at least 90 days. And then they may or may not come back. It's not unusual for people to leave their job for a year and then come back to it. There are people who make their entire careers just doing substitute work at different companies. My mother-in-law is a teacher, and for a very long time, that's what she did. She just went and substituted for people's parental leave. Imagine the kind of power that gives you as a couple, and not just as a woman or as a man, but as a couple. to make those decisions in your life because you're not stigmatized for it. The other thing about Sweden that I really love and really appreciate is around 4 o'clock, you can tell who has children because they do this bag out the door because they got to pick up the kid. And you can also tell if it's that parent's week or the other parent's week, because usually that person that gets up and leaves isn't leaving today. Oh, it must be their partner's turn. And again, no one raises an eyebrow about that. And again, imagine that power. If it's no longer stigmatized, it's no longer weird to get up at 4 o'clock and walk out the door to pick up your kid today. Tomorrow you won't. Maybe tomorrow you'll stay until 6:30 because it's your partner's turn. But today it's 4 o'clock. Gotta go.
And no one is saying, "Oh, you're taking your afternoon
No,
off."
no. So I think that there is something about the fact that it enters, let's use the word legislation, to make it a really normalized process. And I'm not saying it works perfectly in Sweden. Men still take a lot less time than women, but it's there. The opportunity is there, and it's a normal opportunity. It is completely normalized. So I would say that. I have only ever had a child in Sweden, so I can't compare that to the experience of having a child in the US or the UK personally. And I was 6 years old when we left Ukraine. It was still very much part of the Soviet Union. I have no idea.
And childcare is free, as you said.
Yeah, childcare is free. So they go to daycare, creche, kindergarten, whatever you want to call it, for free.
Hi, Lidia. Thank you very much. It's super insightful, and it's so much that I think resonate with all of us here and with things that we are trying also to put in place at Deezer, sharing, allies, etc. On one specific thing that you said at the very beginning of the interview, which I found really interesting, you said there are some events that make up for funny stories that you say. So when you are a victim of something, of some kind of bias or unacceptable behavior, but there are other moments where actually these are the good moments when someone was an ally, helped you out when you didn't even ask for that. And to make that happen in a company is not it's not super easy. Look around you, we're mainly women. If we want to work on allies and allyship and gender equality, we also have to have men, not managers, all types of managers, but men as well at the table and helping us. Would you have any example of either actions that you took in companies where you worked or things that you would invite us to try at Deezer to help us with the allyship?
So again, Many Pets has been doing an amazing job of this. It's also been spearheaded by some of our people team. One of the things that they've been doing about allyship is they've actually been having sessions about what does it mean to be an ally for various things. So part of the talk that I discussed about autism and neurodiversity that, again, I found so incredibly insightful was about how to be an ally for someone who is neurodiverse or autistic. So it's not just about what they experience or how they personally deal with it, but also what they would love to see in terms of allyship. And I think that's really powerful. But you still have to have those people in the room. How you get people in the room, beer and pizza were a treat. I don't know. Again, that was sarcasm, sorry. I think you have to make it interesting enough for people to be there. There's also something like the guilt thing. We have to remove some of the guilt. I don't know how we do that, to be honest. Because I feel guilt when I feel I haven't been a strong enough ally to somebody. And I wonder how much of that is true for others. I don't know. I can only extrapolate for myself. And I can think of hundreds of situations where I thought I could have spoken up. I could have been a better ally for whatever situation. How do we make it feel, I don't even know what word to use, less stressful to be an ally? I don't have an answer. I wish I did. If you get an answer, I want it. Yeah, I want it.
One other question.
You started your career 25 years ago, so you have 25 years of experience for different companies. And could you please comment on that? Because as I imagine, if we are talking 25 years ago, there weren't many initiatives about diversity and inclusion, and now things are changing, but there are still so much things to do. So are you rather optimistic about this? And could you please comment on that? Thank you.
It's a great question, and the answer is going to sound really negative, and I'm going to apologize for the negativity. I honestly thought I wouldn't be having these conversations anymore. I really thought I would not be having these conversations anymore, because you think that there wasn't diversity programs 25 years ago. There were get more women into engineering. even in my university, which is more than 25 years ago, there were always those initiatives. I honestly, if you had asked my 21-year-old self, and my undergraduate is in psychology, which is a very female-dominated undergraduate degree, but a very male-dominated postgraduate degree, which is really weird. If you had asked me when I graduated as an undergraduate at 21, if you find yourself sitting on a couch at almost age 49, will you still be talking about diversity? I'd be like, hell no. And yet here I am. So I know that sounds negative. I just keep on thinking like, I can't give up. You can't give up. It just, at some point, maybe when he's 49.
Well, it's an endless
maybe it's an endless
fight.
It's an endless track. No, I don't know.
Well, thank you for the question and thank you for the answer, because basically you answered the last question of the interview. Maybe I'm looking at the time and we still have 2 questions online. One question, Lidia. There's a lot of debate around this one, the quota. And how do you respond to people that said that this leads to non-deserved promotion and even more bias? I think you have a view on this.
I do. So I've had situations where I've had managers or other managers around me say things like, we need a woman for that role. No, you need a diverse candidate pool, and then you hire the absolute best candidate. I never want someone to look at me and say, you were hired because we needed a diversity tick box. I have a response to that, which starts with an F. And again, I'm going to try not to swear because this is being recorded and then my mom will find it on YouTube and I'll get in trouble. But if the quota is being used as almost like a key result metric, so I'm going to go into product speak now, I apologize. But if the key result is to try and get a certain number of diverse candidates through the door, and then we will still hire the best possible candidate, then maybe that at least holds us to a higher goal. If the quota is used to tick a box and say, now we have 15% women, no. So what is the quota being used for? Just like in product development, what is the key result good for? The key result is there to drive excellence, to drive value. If you're using the key result as something like you tick the box and now we don't have to work any more at it, no.
Okay, thank you. So 2 questions online. What tips would you give to women who are searching for their voice in the tech field?
You already have the voice, just use it. Don't be afraid to use it. You are brilliant, you are wonderful. You've entered the tech field. You have probably passed all sorts of hurdles. Just please use the voice. You may think at first that it sounds little or it doesn't sound like it's heard, but someone's hearing you. So please just don't hold back.
Thank you. And going back to the fact that you mentioned that you've been an immigrant most of your life, for a company like Deezer, whose population is mostly one culture, let's say, and cultural practices and roots, what would you recommend to Deezer to be more inclusive for all kind of employees, not only women, but all kind of nationalities?
That's a great question. But I'm looking around the room and I'm not seeing that. So I'm going to question the question. Can I have a show of hands? How many of you have at least one parent who is not born in the country where you currently live? Okay,
Quite a lot.
fabulous. Okay, I think you guys are doing okay then. I think it's surprising how often that is the case, even when we think it's a fairly homogenized world because we're all speaking a particular language. Maybe you just haven't talked to that person about their cultural background. Again, mine is really obvious because nobody can say my surname, much less spell it. Everyone's like, oh my God. They look at my name and it's like, yeah. I've thought about changing it to Smith. It's never going to happen. But that may be true of somebody named Smith. So America has this great sort of history about Ellis Island and people coming through New York and Ellis Island and getting through there, and then their surnames get changed. And America has this other really great thing where everyone really embraces their sort of, I guess, old world cultures. Like you are Nigerian American, you are, I don't know, Irish American, you're Italian American, you're Ukrainian American. And that's kind of cool. And we have this sort of badge of honor that we wear. I don't think that necessarily happens in all countries. I think people become more, I don't know, maybe you become more French more fast. I don't know. No idea. So I think again, hire for different voices. Hold yourself accountable for picking people that have a different voice than you, and you will probably succeed. Whether that's gender, again, whether that's gender identity, whether that's sexual orientation, whether that's cultural background, racial background, just open up the door. And if you open up that door and you listen to those different voices, different folks will come in the door. It's just about being a little curious and a little bit welcoming.
Good. And maybe to conclude, you mentioned yourself when you were, so let's say we're back to when you were an undergraduate student and you were 20 years old. What would be the one advice, now looking back to the past, you would have given yourself at the beginning of your career?
Don't try not to be you would be one. And then I thought about this a little bit more. I also thought, like, you really need to enjoy the ride. There's gonna, like, the ride is gonna feel like a roller coaster. There's gonna be such absolute downs where you're like, what have I done wrong? And then there's gonna be these absolutely amazing moments. And then you're gonna look back at them years and years later, and some of them will really still be negative, but you will have learned an amazing amount, and you will have realized how strong you are from that really negative moment. And some of them can be really negative. And it's okay to have those negative moments, and it's okay to embrace those and learn from them. And the positive moments, again, it's great to embrace those and learn from them. So the one is, again, I went through all sorts of like trying a suit on to try and be someone that didn't quite fit me. And that never really worked. Like, you can do that for a year or 2 years and you can put on the suit. But I also wish I knew to enjoy some of that ride more. I'm definitely doing that more now. I just wish my 20-year-old self didn't beat herself up quite as badly for the lows. Yeah, I think all 20-year-olds wish that. Or no, all 40-year-olds wish that about their 20-year-old selves, right? Okay. Okay, so if any of you are still in that age group, when you hit that low, it's okay, it's gonna end, and then you're gonna appreciate the stuff you learned during that low. Please don't beat yourself up for it. They're totally not gonna listen to that advice because I didn't, so, but I'm gonna give it anyway. People gave it to me, so.
Okay, very nice. Thank you. Do you have any more questions in the room? We're ending the talk. Well, that was just amazing to have you, to be able to discuss with you at lunch and just to hear you. That's very inspiring, very honest. Alexandra, I don't know if you want to say a word to conclude as well.
No, that was brilliant. Thank you very much for sharing with us. And thank you for the questions. Also, it was really interesting. And let's see each other again. I think we could.
You guys can come over to Stockholm.
Yeah, sure.
Not in January.
Will you do some? Will you bake some bread for us?
I will bake cookies.
Okay. And then we can talk about the key
deal.
things.
Yeah, totally. Okay.
And stay tuned because we should be able to organize another interview before the summer. I'm not disclosing any names, but that would be a woman as amazing as Lidia. So stay tuned for the next talk. Thank you so much. Have a good day, everybody.
Thank you.